Hey guys, tonight we step onto a road that doesn't really believe in comfort, personal space, or the concept of taking it easy. You are standing high in the Andes, where the air feels thinner than your patience before coffee, and the stone beneath your sandals is already holding the day's warmth like a secret. The Inca road stretches ahead of you in tidy, confident lines, as if the mountains themselves agreed to cooperate just this once. A soft wind moves past your ears, carrying the faint smell of dry grass and cold rock. And you realize this place doesn't echo the way you expect. Sound behaves differently up here. It doesn't bounce, it just leaves. You take a breath, and the breath takes a moment to come back. That's your first clue that you probably wouldn't survive this not because anything dramatic is happening, but because your lungs are filing a formal complaint already. You haven't even started walking yet. Somewhere far below, modern life is buzzing and honking and refreshing its notifications. But up here, the road waits with the confidence of something that has never been late. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, go ahead and drop a comment with your location and local time. It's oddly comforting to imagine this ancient road connecting not just valleys and runners, but couches, beds, and late-night listeners around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift your weight and feel the road through your feet. This isn't just any path. This is part of the Capacone, the vast Inca road system that once stretched over 40,000 kilometers across mountains, deserts, and forests. That's the widely accepted fact, and it still makes modern engineers nod slowly in respect. The stones are fitted so neatly together that even centuries later, they don't seem to mind your presence. No mortar, no glue, just patience, precision, and an empire that had places to be. You start walking, slowly, because speed is earned here. The road rises and falls with the landscape, refusing to flatten itself for convenience. It's a conversation, not a command. As you move, you notice small details. Drainage channels cut into the sides, stairways carved into steep slopes, the occasional retaining wall holding the mountain in a gentle but firm grip. This road wasn't built for carts or wheels. The Inca didn't use wheeled vehicles for transport, a fact that still fascinates historians. Instead, everything moved on human feet like yours, only tougher, faster, and significantly less likely to complain. You glance up at the sky, and the clouds seem close enough to eavesdrop. They drift lazily, casting shadows that slide over the stones like slow-moving thoughts. Cloud watching up here isn't just idle daydreaming, it's a skill. Later, you'll learn how runners read these shapes for weather and timing. But for now, they're just company. Quiet, floating company. There's a calm humor in realizing how unprepared you are. Your sandals, simple leather, tied just tightly enough, full ready, feel like a bold-fashioned choice. Inca runners, known as chasqui, often wore similar sandals called ushnutas, designed for grip and flexibility. A lesser-known detail is that runners sometimes carried extra sandals slung over their shoulders, because even the toughest footwear didn't last forever on these stones. You imagine stopping mid-journey to swap sandals like changing socks, and you smile at how practical that feels. As you walk, the altitude nudges your thoughts into a slower rhythm. Your body adapts whether you ask it to or not. The heart works a little harder. The mind grows quieter. There's a reason people come to mountains to think, or to stop thinking altogether. The Inca understood this balance well. They didn't just conquer terrain, they listened to it. Sacred peaks, called apus, loom in the distance, believed to be living spirits watching over travelers. You don't feel watched in a creepy way, more like politely supervised. Here's one of those light jokes the mountains tolerate. You imagine trying to explain this to a modern GPS. Turn left at the sacred mountain. Continue until the clouds feel judgmental. Even the idea of asking for directions feels unnecessary. The road knows where it's going. You pass a stone marker, subtle and worn, and wonder how many feet have brushed past it. Messengers, farmers, soldiers, administrators, all moving with purpose, all trusting this road. The Inca Empire relied on these routes not just for movement, but for unity. Without horses, without wheeled transport, information still traveled astonishingly fast. Messages could cross hundreds of kilometers in days through relay runners. Historians still wonder if the system was even more efficient than we currently estimate, especially during emergencies. The air cools slightly as a cloud slips overhead. And you pause, not because you need to, but because pausing feels allowed here. There's no rush yet. That comes later. For now, the journey is about arrival, about letting your senses recalibrate. You notice how hunger feels different at altitude, how thirst is quieter but more insistent. Somewhere ahead, there will be rest stops, cocoa pauses, moments of shared silence. But that's later. Another small joke drifts in. You consider your step count and realize no fitness app would give this the credit it deserves. No buzz, no badge, just stone and breath and time. The Inca didn't count steps. They counted responsibility. As the road curves gently, you feel a subtle shift, not just in direction, but in mindset. You're no longer visiting the past. You're moving within it. The stones don't announce themselves as ancient. They simply exist, doing their job, inviting you to do yours, which for now is just to keep walking and notice. And as you continue forward, with clouds drifting and mountains listening, you sense that this road is going to teach you patience, endurance, and maybe how to enjoy a good pause. Especially the pauses. You don't hear him at first. That's the unsettling part. One moment it's just you, the road, and the polite judgment of the mountains. And the next, there's a soft rhythm beside breath, sandals, fabric brushing against air. A Chosky runner appears as if he's always been there, which, honestly, he probably has. He looks relaxed in the way only someone doing their exact purpose can look relaxed. Not smiling, not strained, just moving. You instinctively try to match his pace, which is adorable. He slows just slightly, out of courtesy, and you appreciate this kindness more than you'll ever be able to express without wheezing. The Chasqui were elite messengers of the Inca Empire, trained from a young age to run long distances at high altitude. That's the widely accepted fact. They weren't just fast, they were reliable, disciplined, and deeply trusted. Messages, small goods, and even fresh fish for the emperor could move astonishing distances through this relay system. Fresh fish, in the mountains, your brain pauses on that like a buffering video. The runner glances at you not suspiciously, just curiously, and you realize something important. He's not racing. He's working. There's a difference. His stride is efficient, almost gentle, as if he's borrowing speed rather than forcing it. You, meanwhile, are negotiating with your lungs like they're a separate department. Still, you manage to keep up. Mostly, he carries a small bag slung across his chest. Inside, you know, is a message, possibly a quipu, those knotted cords used for record keeping. Quipu are one of those things historians love to argue about. We know they recorded numbers, census data, supplies. Historians still wonder if they also encoded full narratives or spoken language, which would change how we understand Inca communication entirely. The runner doesn't look like someone burdened by academic debates. He just carries the thing and keeps moving. You notice a conch shell tied at his side. This is the putatu, used to announce arrival at relay stations. It's less dramatic trumpet fanfare and more polite but firm announcement of purpose. You imagine blowing one and producing a sound that makes everyone politely pretend not to notice. Best left to professionals. The road narrows slightly and you walk closer together. There's a comfort in shared movement, even without conversation. Silence here isn't awkward, it's efficient. When the runner does speak, it's brief and practical. He points ahead, explaining the next stretch with a few words and a gesture that somehow conveys distance, elevation, and effort all at once. You nod, as if you understand. You do not fully understand. Here's a lesser-known detail. Chasqui didn't usually run the entire distance themselves. They ran short segments, often just a few kilometers, before passing the message to the next runner waiting at a relay station. This system reduced fatigue and maintained speed. It's like the world's most intense group project, except everyone actually does their part. You find this oddly soothing. You ask carefully, between breaths, why speed matters so much. He considers this, then shrugs. Speed keeps the empire connected. Speed keeps the emperor informed. Speed means food arrives before it spoils, and decisions arrive before they're useless. It's not about urgency, it's about continuity. You think about how often modern speed feels frantic rather than purposeful, and the comparison makes you smile. Another light joke slips in as you imagine explaining email delays to this runner. Yes, the message was sent instantly, but then everyone stared at it for 3 hours. He would not be impressed. The landscape shifts as you move. The road dips, then climbs, then flattens just long enough to make you suspicious. Your muscles warm into the effort, and your breath finds a rhythm that feels almost sustainable. Almost. The runner adjusts his pace subtly, never showing off, never lagging. There's a humility to it. He's part of a system, not the star of it. You pass a small stone platform, ahead of Chasquiwasi, a runner station. Another runner waits there, alert, ready. The exchange is quick. A nod, a transfer, a brief word. No ceremony. The next runner takes off smoothly, the message continuing its journey without pause. You realize you've just witnessed information moving faster than most people could manage on horseback in other parts of the world at the time. That's the fact that makes historians sit up straighter. The runner beside you slows now. His segment is done. He doesn't look tired, just complete. You, on the other hand, feel like you've aged slightly. He gestures for you to keep going, as if this was always temporary. And maybe it was. These roads weren't built for companionship. They were built for flow. Before he turns back, you notice something small. He smiles. Not broadly, not performatively, just enough to acknowledge the shared stretch of road. There's humor in that smile, a quiet recognition that you did your best and survived. Barely, as you continue alone again, the rhythm he set lingers. Your steps feel more confident. The road feels less intimidating. You understand now that speed here isn't about rushing. It's about trust in the road, in the next runner, in the system holding everything together. And as the wind carries the faint echo of sandals moving away, you realize you're not just walking an ancient road anymore. You're keeping pace with an idea that once held an empire together. One breath, one message, one quiet runner at a time. Once the runner disappears into the folds of the road, your body politely informs you that it has opinions. Your feet tingle with that pleasant, not pleasant sensation of effort, and your lungs settle into a rhythm that feels like a negotiated truce. The altitude is no longer a surprise. It's a constant presence, like a quiet roommate who never leaves but mostly keeps to themselves. You inhale slowly, noticing how the air feels cooler as it slides in, thinner as it leaves, and somehow heavier than it looks. Your sandals flex against the stones, and you become newly aware of how much information travels through your feet. The Inca built these roads with a subtle crown in the center, so water would run off to the sides, which means your steps are always making micro-adjustments. It's like walking on a thought rather than a surface. A widely accepted fact drifts through your mind. These roads were engineered to last, with drainage, retaining walls, and staircases carved directly into bedrock. They weren't temporary solutions. They were promises. You glance down at your sandals and think, not for the first time, that modern shoes are doing a lot of emotional labor. Bushnootas were simple leather soles, woven straps, yet perfectly suited for long-distance travel. A lesser-known detail is that some sandals were made thicker for colder regions, thinner for warmer ones, suggesting a quiet sophistication in what looks like minimalism. You wiggle your toes and imagine swapping sandals at a relay station like a pit stop, except calmer and with fewer sponsorships. The road climbs again, and your breath grows louder in your ears. Not panicked, just present. You slow your pace, because this place rewards listening. The Andes don't rush you. They let you find your speed, and if that speed is slow, that's fine. Your muscles warm, then soften, and you discover the strange comfort of sustained effort. It's the opposite of the gym. There's no mirror, no music, no timer threatening to beep. Just movement and time agreeing to coexist. Here's a light joke the mountains allow. You consider checking your heart rate. Then remember your heart is already checking you. Constantly, very attentively. As you continue, the air carries a faint scent, dry earth, stone, something green far below. Vegetation thins at this elevation, and the colors simplify. Browns, grays, muted greens. The sky, however, refuses to be modest. It stretches wide and bright, clouds drifting like slow thoughts you don't need to finish. Cloud watching becomes less of a pastime and more of a collaboration. You notice how certain shapes cling to peaks, how shadows signal shifting weather. Inca travelers read these signs instinctively. Historians still debate how much of this knowledge was formalized versus taught through experience, passed quietly from step to step. Your breathing deepens, and you realize you're no longer fighting the altitude. You're working with it. The body adapts in small, uncelebrated ways, blood thickening, breaths deepening, thoughts slowing. The Inca lived at these heights permanently, their physiology subtly shaped by generations above the clouds. That's the fact that makes modern science nod appreciatively. Adaptation isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just steady. You stop briefly, not from exhaustion, but from curiosity. A low stone wall lines the road here, offering a place to lean, to look. The valley below stretches out like a paused story. You feel the sun on your face, gentle but insistent. At this altitude, sunlight feels closer, more personal. You imagine applying sunscreen and the mountains, politely pretending not to notice. Another small joke arrives. You wonder how long it would take for a modern delivery app to give up and say, "We're sorry, your location is unavailable." As you resume walking, your mind drifts to the runners again. How did they train? How did they breathe? Young boys were selected early, trained to run, and remember, to observe and endure. Endurance wasn't just physical, it was mental. To run the same roads again and again, in all weather, carrying messages you might never know the importance of, that requires a calm relationship with repetition. There's something soothing about that thought. Purpose doesn't always need variety. The road curves, revealing a short staircase carved into the mountainside. Each step is uneven, sized for human legs rather than symmetry. You take them carefully, appreciating the quiet genius of stairs that don't pretend to be decorative. These were built to be used, not admired. You feel a small satisfaction with each step, like completing a thought without overthinking it. You notice how hunger arrives differently here. It's not sharp, it's patient. The Inca diet for travelers focused on endurance: dried potatoes, maize, sometimes charqui, dried meat. No snacking, no grazing. Food was fuel, respected and portioned. You imagine explaining emotional eating to a chusky and decide it would be a short conversation. As the path levels out again, you find a rhythm that feels almost meditative. Step, breath, step. The road hums beneath you, not audibly, but with a sense of continuity. It's easy to forget how far you've come, which is probably the point. Distance here isn't measured in miles. It's measured in effort and attention. You pause once more, looking up at a peak crowned with drifting cloud. The apus, sacred mountains, were believed to watch over travelers, offering protection or challenge depending on respect shown. You don't feel judged, just acknowledged. Historians still wonder how much these beliefs influenced daily decision-making, versus serving as a cultural framework for understanding risk and uncertainty. Either way, the effect is calming. It's easier to move forward when the world feels attentive rather than hostile. Your breath steadies, your feet find confidence. The road no longer feels like something you're surviving. It feels like something you're participating in. And as you continue, with sandals whispering against stone and clouds keeping pace above, you realize that altitude doesn't just thin the air. It thins the noise, leaving behind only what you need to carry forward. The road begins to suggest rest before you consciously decide you want it. That's how these places work. They anticipate rather than announce. Ahead, the stones widen slightly, the path easing into a small cluster of low walls and neatly arranged rooms built from the same patient rock as the road itself. You've reached a tambo, one of the Inca waystations spaced carefully along major routes, and your shoulders relax before you even stop walking. Tambos were the quiet backbone of the empire. That's the widely accepted fact historians agree on with unusual enthusiasm. They served as rest stops, storage depots, and coordination points for messengers, soldiers, and officials. You step inside one now, ducking slightly under a low doorway, and feel the temperature shift immediately. The stone holds coolness like a favor. It's not luxury, but it's relief, and relief is underrated. You set yourself down on a stone bench that seems shaped by use rather than design. The room smells faintly of earth and smoke, the kind of scent that suggests many quiet evenings rather than one dramatic event. Outside, the wind moves along the walls, polite enough not to interrupt. Inside, there's space to breathe, to stretch your legs, to let your feet remember what stillness feels like. Here's a lesser-known detail that makes you appreciate this place even more. Tambos weren't just for elites or messengers. Local travelers, laborers, and sometimes entire groups moving for state work could use them. They were part of a larger system of reciprocity called mita, where communities contributed labor in exchange for security and resources. You picture this as an ancient version of everyone chips in, except far more organized and with significantly fewer emails. You lean back against the wall and close your eyes for a moment. The stone is cool through your clothing, grounding. Your breathing slows naturally, not because you're trying to relax, but because the space invites it. You imagine runners arriving here at all hours, some bursting in with energy, others quietly collapsing into rest. No one judging, just shared understanding. There's food stored here too. You spot baskets tucked into corners, sealed against pests and weather. Dried maize, Junior freeze-dried potatoes perfected by Andean ingenuity, and sometimes coca leaves, chewed to help with altitude and fatigue. Coca use was widespread and regulated, not recreational in the modern sense, but practical. Historians still debate how access to coca reflected social status versus medical necessity, but no one argues its effectiveness up here. You imagine explaining this nuance to a modern wellness influencer and decide the tambo would politely eject you both. A caretaker appears, moving quietly, efficient and unbothered by your presence. They don't ask questions. Tambos weren't places for conversation unless needed. You're offered water, cool and clean, and you accept with gratitude that feels deeper than thirst. Water at altitude tastes different, lighter somehow, like it's already been filtered through sky. Here's one of those light jokes your tired brain supplies. You think about leaving a review. 5 stars. Great stonework. Would rest again. The mountains do not respond, but you sense approval anyway. You step back outside briefly, stretching, and notice how the tambo fits into the landscape without trying to impress it. No bright colors, no towering structures, just enough that restraint feels intentional. The Inca didn't build to dominate the environment. They built to cooperate with it. That philosophy shows up everywhere, from terrace farming to road construction, and it's quietly radical. As you sit again, you listen. There's a low hum of wind, the occasional distant call of a bird, the subtle creak of stone adjusting to temperature. Silence here isn't empty, it's layered. You become aware of your own small sounds, the shift of fabric, the soft exhale of breath, and how they fit into the whole without disrupting it. You think about time differently in this place. Tambos weren't destinations, they were pauses. Necessary, respected pauses. In a world obsessed with speed, the Inca built rest into the system that feels almost rebellious. Historians still wonder how strictly schedules were enforced versus adapted to conditions like weather or illness. The truth likely lies somewhere practical and humane. Your muscles loosen as you sit, the earlier effort dissolving into warmth. You realize how much you needed this without knowing it. Rest here doesn't feel like stopping. It feels like preparing. The road continues beyond the tambo, of course, but it does so patiently, confident you'll return when ready. As you stand to leave, you glance back once more. The tambo remains, unbothered, ready for the next traveler. You step onto the road again, refreshed, carrying not just energy, but a deeper appreciation for the quiet systems that make long journeys possible. And as your sandals meet the stones once more, you feel the rhythm return steady.com. Supported, knowing that somewhere ahead, another pause is waiting, just as thoughtfully placed as this one. Not far beyond the tambo, the road softens its attitude. It doesn't flatten exactly, but it eases, like it knows you've earned a gentler stretch. The sun hangs a little higher now, warming your shoulders, and the wind settles into something almost friendly. This is the kind of moment the Chasqui understood instinctively, not a full stop. Not a sprint, just a pause that tastes like balance. You notice a small gathering ahead. Not a crowd, just a handful of travelers standing near a low stone platform. There's no urgency in their movements. Someone kneels, someone stretches, someone gazes upward with an expression that suggests they're thinking about nothing at all. You're waved over, casually, as if you were expected. Maybe you were. This is where cocoa enters the story. Not the sweet, modern kind, but a bitter, earthy drink made from cacao, occasionally mixed with spices or maize. It wasn't common, and it wasn't indulgent. That's the widely accepted fact. Cocoa in the Andes was valuable, often reserved for ritual or special circumstances, and when it appeared, it meant something. You're handed a small vessel, warm against your palms, and the scent rises slowly, rich and grounding. You take a sip and pause. It's not trying to impress you. It's not desert, it's sustenance with personality. The bitterness wakes your senses without demanding excitement, and the warmth spreads in a way that feels earned. A lesser-known detail is that cacao likely reached the Inca through long trade networks from Mesoamerica, making this drink a quiet symbol of connection across vast distances. You smile at the thought of cocoa traveling farther than most people ever would. Someone beside you tilts their head back, eyes tracing the sky. You follow their gaze. Clouds drift lazily, stacking, thinning, reshaping themselves with unhurried creativity. Cloud, watching up here isn't idle, it's informative. The shape, speed, and height of clouds offer clues about weather, timing, and safety. Inca travelers paid close attention, reading the sky the way others read maps. Historians still wonder how formalized this knowledge was taught in structured ways or absorbed through lived experience. You sip again, slower this time. The pause stretches comfortably. No one checks anything. No one urges movement. This isn't lost time. It's calibrated time. The Inca understood that endurance wasn't built by constant motion alone. It required moments like this: warmth, observation, shared silence. Here's one of those light jokes your brain offers. You imagine explaining mindfulness to this group and realize they would just nod politely and keep watching the clouds. The cocoa warms your hands as much as your core. You notice how conversation, when it happens, is sparse and functional. A comment about wind direction, a nod toward a distant peak. Someone laughs softly at a private thought. Humor here isn't loud, it's efficient. Even jokes conserve energy. You lean against a stone and let your gaze drift. The landscape feels expansive but not overwhelming. Valleys fold into each other gently. Colors muted but confident. The road ahead is visible, winding like a deliberate thought rather than a challenge. You feel a subtle shift inside, not excitement, not fatigues, something closer to contentment. This pause also serves another purpose. It reinforces community. Even brief encounters on the road mattered. Sharing a drink, sharing a view, created small bonds that made long journeys feel less solitary. Historians debate how much of this was intentional design versus natural human behavior encouraged by shared hardship. Either way, the effect is undeniable. As the last of the cocoa is finished, the vessel is returned without ceremony. No lingering sweetness, no aftertaste demanding attention. Just warmth, then neutrality. You appreciate that some experiences don't need to follow you. They just need to prepare you. You stand, stretching lightly, and glance once more at the clouds. They've shifted while you weren't watching closely, which feels like a small lesson. The sky doesn't wait for your attention. It just continues. As you step back onto the road, your stride feels smoother, your breath more cooperative. The pause did its work. You didn't rush it, and it didn't rush you. That mutual respect carries forward, settling into your muscles and your mood. And as you walk on, cocoa warmth fading into steady energy, clouds rearranging themselves above you, understand something quietly important. Sometimes the most powerful part of a journey isn't the distance covered, but the moments when you stop, look up, and let the world continue without you for just a little while. The pause leaves a residue not on your hands, but in your attention. As you walk on, you notice how the sky seems closer now, as if the clouds are curious about your progress. They gather, thin, and gather again, drifting in layers that feel deliberate even when they're not. You realize that up here, navigation isn't only about stones underfoot. It's about movement above your head. The road teaches you to look up without tripping. You slow, not because you're tired, but because watching the clouds requires a different pace. A long ribbon of white clings to a distant ridge, stubborn and low. Another cloud climbs, then dissolves, like a thought you almost finish. The wind brushes your cheek, cool and dry, and you taste dust and sunlight. This is the language of the undisquiet, visual, patient. You're learning to read it, sentence by sentence. Here's the widely accepted fact. Inca travelers paid close attention to weather patterns, especially clouds, winds, and light, to judge safety and timing. Without written forecasts or instruments, they relied on observation honed over generations. You imagine this knowledge as a soft inheritance, passed hand to hand, eye to eye, with no need for diagrams. Just look, just notice. A lesser-known detail settles in as you watch. Certain cloud formations were associated with specific mountains, returning again and again at predictable times. These patterns weren't just scenic, they were signals. A cloud lingering on a peak might suggest afternoon rain. A fast-moving veil could mean wind. You test this by watching one shape slide faster than the rest. And you feel oddly competent, like you've learned a trick no one bothered to explain before. You stop near a low rise where the road curves gently. From here, the view opens wide. Valleys stretch and fold, and the road threads through them with quiet confidence. You realize that the road's direction often aligns with natural contours rather than fighting them. It's easier to follow a thought than to argue with it. The Inca seemed to understand that the landscape already had ideas. The road just listened. Another light joke floats in. You think about checking the weather app and laugh at how aggressively unhelpful it would be here. Chance of clouds. Yes, obviously. You resume walking, keeping one eye on the sky. Your breath matches your steps, and your steps match the land. There's a calm satisfaction in aligning yourself with things larger than you. The mountains don't rush, and neither do the clouds. When the wind shifts, you feel it immediately on your skin, in your balance. It's a reminder that navigation isn't just visual, it's sensory. You recall that the Inca calendar was deeply tied to celestial and environmental observations on positions, stars, seasons. While tonight's focus is clouds, you can feel the same attentiveness at work. Historians still wonder how standardized this knowledge was across the empire, and how much local variation shaped decisions on the road. It's likely that there wasn't one rulebook, just a shared habit of paying attention. A shadow passes over you as a cloud slides across the sun. The temperature dips slightly, enough to notice. You pause, testing the air with your face, like a cat considering a nap. The shadow moves on. The sun returns. You smile at the simplicity of it. Nothing dramatic, just information delivered gently. As you walk, you spot small stone cairns off the path marker's offerings. Reminders. Travelers sometimes left small stones or gestures here, acknowledging the place and asking for safe passage. You don't feel compelled to add anything, but you appreciate the sentiment. It's a quiet conversation with the land, not a demand. Your mind wanders to the runners again. How did they make these judgments at speed? How did they decide when to push and when to wait? The answer seems less about rules and more about trust. Trust in experience, in signs, in the road itself. Speed without awareness would be dangerous here. Awareness without movement would be pointless. Balance, again. Here's your second gentle joke of the section. You imagine a runner stopping mid-sprint to stare thoughtfully at a cloud, and then nodding as if the cloud said something encouraging. The sky begins to layer itself differently now, clouds stacking higher, edges softening. You sense that weather may change later, not urgently, just eventually. This knowledge doesn't stress you. It comforts you. Knowing what's coming, even vaguely, feels better than guessing. You walk on, guided by stone and sky together. The road remains steady, but your understanding deepens. You're not just following a path. You're participating in a conversation between earth and air. Each step is informed by what you see above and feel below. As the light shifts toward afternoon softness, you realize that cloud watching has changed your posture. Your shoulders drop, your gaze lifts, you're less inward, more spacious. It's easier to breathe like this, even at altitude. And as the road bends ahead, clouds drifting and reshaping themselves without hurry, you carry forward a new skill, one that doesn't announce itself as navigation, but quietly keeps you moving in the right direction, guided by patience, attention, and the gentle art of looking up. The road narrows again, as if inviting quieter thoughts. Your steps fall into a soft rhythm, and with the sky still half in your awareness, you begin to notice what isn't visible. Messages move through this landscape without words, without ink, without anything you'd recognize as writing. And yet, information travels, efficiently, reliably, almost politely. You encounter it first as a bundle of cords resting inside a small stone shelter near the road. The cords are knotted, looped, dyed in subtle shades of earth and sky. This is a quipu. You've heard of them, of course, but seeing one this close shifts it from curiosity to presence. Quipu were used across the Inca Empire to record numbers, manage resources, track populations, and possibly much more. That's the widely accepted fact, the part everyone agrees on, nodding thoughtfully. What no one agrees on, and likely never will entirely, is how far this system went. Historians still wonder if quipu encoded full narratives, names, or even spoken language. Some believe the knots functioned like a sophisticated mnemonic system, relying on trained readers to interpret context. Others suspect a deeper symbolic language that we've only partially decoded. You look at the chords and feel that familiar, cozy frustration of a mystery that refuses to solve itself. A caretaker notices your interest and gestures gently, showing how the knots, very tight, loose, clustered, spaced. Thickness matters, color matters, position matters. It's less like reading a sentence and more like feeling a pattern. You imagine trying to explain this to someone obsessed with fonts and realize they would either love it or collapse. Here's a lesser-known detail that makes you pause. Quipu weren't standardized across the entire empire in the way modern writing systems are. Local variations existed, shaped by region and purpose. That flexibility made the system resilient, but also maddening for modern researchers. It's like discovering every town uses the same alphabet but tells jokes differently. You walk on, thinking about messages that moved faster than gossip, yet left no paper trail. Chasqui carried quipu and oral messages together, blending physical record with human memory. It's a system that trusted people as much as objects. That trust feels rare and oddly comforting. You consider how much modern systems assume forgetfulness and build redundancies around it. The Inca approach assumed attention. Another light joke slips in. You imagine losing a quipu and saying, "It's fine, I remember most of it," and everyone just staring at you calmly until you retrieve it. As the road bends, you pass a relay station where another runner waits. He's relaxed, leaning lightly against a wall, eyes scanning the distance. When a runner arrives, the exchange is quick. A nod, a word, a transfer. No signatures, no Tetris, yet the system works. That's the part that feels almost magical. You reflect on how memory functions here, not as something fragile, but as something trained. Oral histories, songs, rhythms, and repeated routes reinforced information. Walking the same road again and again becomes a form of remembering. The road itself is a mnemonic device. Each bend, each rise, each tambo anchors knowledge in place. Historians still debate how errors were handled. What happened if a message was misremembered? Were there checks, corrections? The answers are fuzzy, but the scale of the empire suggests the system was accurate enough to sustain power across vast distances. Good enough, consistently. That's an underrated achievement. You imagine the pressure of carrying a message you don't understand but know matters. There's something calming about that responsibility. You're not meant to interpret. You're meant to deliver. Modern life could use more roles like that. As you continue, the chords and knots linger in your thoughts. They feel tactile, grounded, honest. No glowing screens, no endless revisions. Just intention, tied carefully, handed off, and trusted to arrive. The road opens slightly, and the wind carries a low, steady sound, almost like breath moving through fabric. You realize that communication here isn't just about speed. It's about continuity. Messages move because people move, because roads exist, because pauses are respected. And as you walk on, you carry a quiet appreciation for a system that spoke without words, remembered without writing, and trusted human attention to do what it has always done, best carry meaning forward, one careful knot at a time. Hunger arrives politely now, tapping you on the shoulder rather than grabbing your sleeve. It's the kind of hunger that asks a question instead of making a demand. The road responds by guiding you toward another small stop, less formal than a tampu, more like a shared understanding that bodies need fuel. You sit, cross-legged, on a flat stone, warmed by the sun, and unpack what endurance tastes like. The food is simple, almost stubbornly so. Dried maize kernels, a small cake made from ground corn, a handful of tuna potatoes, freeze-dried by the cold nights and bright days of the Andes. This is the widely accepted fact. Inca travelers ate for stamina, not indulgence. Meals were compact, portable, and designed to last without spoiling. No sauces, no garnish, just reliability. You bite into the maize cake and chew slowly. It's dense, faintly sweet, and takes its time. Your jaw works, your thoughts slow, and you realize that this food doesn't rush you. A lesser-known detail slips in as you eat. Tuna could be stored for years, sometimes decades, without losing nutritional value. The processed freezing potatoes overnight, drying them in the sun, stomping out moisture, was both labor-intensive and communal. You imagine a whole village rhythmically stomping potatoes and decide it's the most productive group activity you've ever heard of. Here's your first gentle joke of the section. You consider calling this meal prepping and immediately apologize to the mountains. You drink water afterward, not during. That's how it's done. Sips are measured, respectful. Water here isn't just hydration. It's logistics. You think about how casually modern life treats water left half-finished, forgotten, replaced, and feel a small pang of guilt. The Inca built fountains and channels to guide water carefully, honoring its movement. Nothing wasted. Everything intentional. As you eat, you notice how your body responds. There's no sugar spike, no dramatic burst of energy. Instead, there's a steady warmth, a quiet readiness. Endurance food doesn't entertain, it supports. You imagine explaining this to someone clutching a neon-colored energy bar and decide to let history speak for itself. Coca leaves appear again, offered without ceremony. Chewed slowly, they ease fatigue and help with altitude. This wasn't addiction, it was adaptation. The leaves taste bitter, grassy, grounding. Historians still debate how coca use intersected with class and ritual, who had access, when, and why. What's clear is that it worked, and it fits seamlessly into daily life. You chew thoughtfully, feeling the subtle lift, and nod in appreciation. You glance around at others, eating quietly, each person absorbed in their own small ritual. There's no sharing of opinions, no commentary on flavor. Food isn't a performance here. It's a partnership. The road demands energy, the food provides it. End of conversation. Another light joke drifts in. You imagine a cooking show where the host whispers, "Tonight, we'll be making sufficient calories." You finish eating and wipe your hands on your clothing, crumbs falling back to the earth without fuss. Nothing here requires cleanup beyond basic respect. You stretch, feeling the food settle not in your stomach, but in your legs. It's an odd sensation fuel. You can almost feel distributing itself. You think about the runners again. Chasqui ate similar foods, timed carefully between runs. Their diets were regulated, not restrictive, designed to keep them light and fast. Fresh food was rare on the road, reserved for special deliveries or high-status recipients. That's how fish could reach the emperor from the coast carried fresh, through relay runners who barely paused. The image makes you smile and shake your head. Somewhere, someone was very committed to seafood. Historians still wonder how strictly these diets were enforced, and how much personal variation existed. Did runners sneak extra snacks? Did regional preferences slip in? The records don't say, and maybe that's fine. Some mysteries don't need solving. They just need imagining. You stand and feel ready, again not energized, but prepared. There's a difference. Preparedness is quieter. It doesn't buzz, it hums. You take a few steps, testing your legs, and they respond willingly. The road seems pleased. As you walk on, the taste of maize fades, replaced by the familiar dryness of the air. Hunger retreats to a manageable distance, content to wait. You realize that this approach to food, eat when needed, stop when sufficient, mirrors the road itself. Nothing excessive, nothing rushed. The sun shifts slightly, and shadows lengthen just enough to notice. You think about how meals mark time differently than clocks. Here, eating signals readiness rather than reward. It's a pause that points forward, not backward. And as you continue along the stone path, stomach settled, breath steady, you carry with you the quiet lesson of endurance food. That sometimes the most satisfying meals are the ones that don't ask for applause. Just a long road and a willing body to carry them forward. The road begins to feel busier without becoming loud. You notice it first in the subtle choreography, ahead figures appearing, disappearing, reappearing, farther along. Like thoughts passed between people who don't need to speak much. This is the relay in motion. The system that made distance behave itself. You slow slightly, not to interfere, but to watch. A chasqui stands at a small station ahead, posture relaxed, eyes alert. He's not pacing. He's waiting in a way that suggests readiness rather than impatience. This is one of the great misunderstandings about speed. It relies heavily on stillness. The Inca relay system was built around this principle. That's the widely accepted facts. Short, intense runs between stations, messages passed seamlessly, allowing information to cross hundreds of kilometers in days, not weeks, days. You step aside as a runner approaches, sandals striking stone in a steady rhythm. There's no dramatic sprint at the end, no theatrical collapse. Just a controlled arrival, a nod, a handoff. The waiting runner takes off almost immediately, the message continuing without interruption. It's smooth enough to feel inevitable. You realize you've been holding your breath, and you let it go. Here's a lesser-known detail that makes the system even more impressive. Relay stations were placed strategically based on terrain, not distance alone. Steep climbs meant shorter runs. Gentler stretches allowed longer ones. The system adapted to the land rather than forcing uniformity. You think about modern schedules that ignore context entirely and feel a wave of sympathy for anyone. Trapped in a meeting at the wrong altitude, you follow alongside for a short stretch. careful not to disrupt the flow. The runner's pace is brisk but controlled, breath measured, posture efficient. There's no wasted movement. Every step has a reason. You imagine trying to maintain this pace while also checking messages and immediately laugh at yourself. Multitasking is not invited here. Another light joke drifts in. You picture a relay runner stopping to stretch and announcing, "Just need a second," and the entire empire politely waiting. It doesn't work like that. Precision matters. As you walk, you notice how the road supports this rhythm. Clear sightlines, consistent surfaces, subtle markers indicating stations ahead. This isn't accidental. The Inca invested heavily in infrastructure because it made everything else possible. Administration, agriculture, defense all depended on reliable movement. Historians still debate how centralized this planning was versus shaped by local knowledge. But the result speaks clearly under your feet. The relay also reinforces community. No runner carries the burden alone. Responsibility is shared, segmented, manageable. You find this comforting. The message doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to the system. That reduces pressure even as it increases efficiency. It's a balance modern life often forgets. You watch another exchange, then another. Each one slightly different, yet fundamentally the same. A rhythm emerges, almost musical. Arrival, transfer, departure. No applause. No acknowledgement beyond what's necessary. The humility of it feels intentional. You imagine being part of this system, knowing your role precisely. Run hard, stop cleanly, trust the next person. There's relief in that clarity. No endless optimization, no personal branding. Just contribution. Historians still wonder how runners were motivated beyond duty honor status, privilege. Likely all of it woven together. Chasqui held respected positions, exempt from certain labor, supported by the state. Speed earned trust, and trust carried weight. You nod at that logic. Reliability is a form of power. As the road stretches ahead, you feel the relay's influence even when no runners are in sight. The pace you've adopted feels informed by its steady, purposeful, sustainable. You're not rushing, but you're not drifting either. You're moving with intention. The sun slides lower, light softening, shadows lengthening across the stones. The relay continues regardless, adapting to time and terrain. Messages don't wait for perfect conditions. They move when they must. And as you continue walking, watching the system breathe in motion and stillness, you realize that the true marvel isn't how fast information traveled. It's how calmly it did so, carried by human legs, trusted hands, and a road that understood the value of passing things along without holding on too tightly. As the light softens, something else becomes noticeable: sound. Not the loud kind, but the conversational kind. Voices drift along the road in brief bursts, then fade again, like birds testing the evening. You draw closer to a small cluster of runners and travelers gathered near a bend where the road flattens just enough to invite loitering. This is where humor lives on the road, tucked between effort and expectation. You arrive mid-conversation, which is the safest way to arrive anywhere. A runner is complaining, gently, about a route that insists on climbing, just when you think it's done. Another responds with mock sympathy, nodding gravely, as if hearing a tragedy unfold. The laughter that follows is quiet, controlled, respectful of breath. Even jokes conserve energy here. This is a widely accepted fact that rarely gets written down. Chasqui were human, and humans joke. Work this demanding requires release, and humor is lighter to carry than frustration. You notice how teasing focuses on shared experiences, steep climbs, stubborn winds, stones that feel personally placed to trip you. No one jokes about the message. That remains sacred. You sit nearby, stretching your legs, and listen. The jokes are dry, observational, almost minimalist. One runner gestures at the road ahead and says something that makes the others sigh dramatically. You don't catch every word, but the tone is unmistakable. Affectionate annoyance. The road is demanding, but it's also familiar. Complaining about it is a form of respect. Here's a lesser-known detail that adds texture to the moment. Runners often developed reputations for certain routes. Some stretches were known as merciful, others as cruel, and some as endlessly deceptive. Names stuck. Stories accumulated. The road wasn't just infrastructure. It was a character with moods and habits. You imagine a runner saying, "I've got the long one today," and everyone nodding without needing clarification. You add your own quiet observation, something about the stones always looking smoother from a distance. It earns a soft laugh, which feels like a small victory. Humor here isn't about wit. It's about recognition. If someone laughs, it means they've been there too. Another light joke drifts in as you consider modern workplace humor. You imagine trying to bond over shared suffering via email and immediately feel grateful for stone roads and fresh air. The conversation drifts toward rivalry, but gently. Which relay is faster? Which route is shorter? Really? There's pride, but it's playful. No one needs to prove anything. Speed is measured, but not worshipped. The system values consistency over heroics. You like that. As the group begins to disperse, you walk alongside one runner for a bit. He gestures towards the mountains and remarks on how they never change, then pauses and corrects himself. They change constantly, just slowly. The observation hangs there, thoughtful. Historians still wonder how much Inca humor reflected philosophical views versus daily practicality. It's likely both, folded together like everything else here. You part ways without ceremony, humor spent for now. The road grows quieter again, but the laughter lingers in your mood. It lightens your steps. You realize that endurance isn't just physical, it's emotional. Shared humor smooths rough stretches, makes repetition tolerable, even enjoyable. As evening approaches, the sky deepens in color, clouds thinning into streaks of pale gold and gray. You walk on, carrying the echo of soft laughter and the knowledge that even in an empire built on efficiency, there was room for complaint, teasing, and the occasional joke about a hill that absolutely did not need to be there. And as your steps continue, steady and unhurried, you understand that the road doesn't just connect places. It connects people through effort, through pauses, and through the small, human habit of laughing together before moving on. The sky decides to remind you who's in charge. It doesn't announce anything dramatically, no thunder, no sudden darkness, just a gradual thickening of clouds, a cooling of the air, a wind that shifts direction without asking your opinion. Storms here don't feel aggressive, they feel inevitable. You adjust your pace, not faster, not slower, just more attentive. Rain begins as a suggestion. A few drops, spaced generously, tapping the stones like someone testing a surface before committing. You pull your clothing closer, grateful for layers that were designed for exactly this kind of indecision. The Inca planned for weather as a constant variable, not an exception. That's the widely accepted fact. Roads, bridges, and waystations were built to endure rain, wind, and temperature swings without complaint. You pass beneath a slight overhang where the road hugs the mountain more closely. Water runs along carved channels beside you, directed neatly away from the walking surface. It's satisfying to watch rain obeying stone. A lesser-known detail surfaces as you walk. These drainage systems were maintained regularly, cleared of debris by local communities as part of shared responsibility. Infrastructure here wasn't abandoned after construction. It was cared for. The rain thickens, still gentle, still polite. You don't feel rushed to escape it. Wet stone darkens in color, deepening the contrast between road and earth. The scent of rain rises clean, mineral, grounding. You take a deeper breath and feel the air cool your lungs. It's refreshing in a way that feels earned. Here's a light joke that drifts in. You imagine checking a weather forecast and seeing mountain will do whatever it wants. You slow slightly, not out of caution, but respect. Storms up here can change quickly, and patience is safer than optimism. You recall how runners adjusted their schedules based on conditions, sometimes waiting out weather rather than forcing progress. Historians still wonder how rigid message deadlines were versus how much discretion runners had. The evidence suggests flexibility, understanding that a delayed message is better than a lost runner. The rain eases, then stops, leaving the world rinsed and quiet. Clouds hang low, wrapping peaks in soft grey scarves. You continue, shoes damp but spirit steady. The road hasn't changed, and neither have you. Not really. You've just added another layer of experience. You think about control, how much modern life tries to enforce it, how much stress that creates. Here, control is shared with the environment. You respond instead of command. It feels healthier. As you walk on, the sky begins to lighten again. Clouds thinning, light returning gently. The storm passed without drama, without disruption. Just another reminder that progress here is measured not by speed, but by adaptability. And as your steps find their rhythm once more, you carry forward a quiet confidence. You can wait, you can adjust, and you can continue just like the road has always done. The mountains draw closer as the light shifts, not physically, but emotionally. Peaks that once felt distant now feel present, attentive, like listeners leaning in. You sense it before you name it, the feeling that this place is watched. Not in a threatening way, but in the way a library watches you lower your voice automatically. These are the apus, the sacred mountains, and they've been here longer than the road, longer than the empire, longer than most ideas. You walk with your head slightly tilted now, eyes tracing ridgelines and shadows. Each mountain has a shape distinct enough to recognize, even at a distance. That's the widely accepted fact. The Inca viewed specific peaks as living entities, protectors of regions and people. These weren't abstract gods floating somewhere else. They were right here, made of stone and sky. You pause near a small stone pile beside the Rodanapachita. Travelers sometimes added a stone, a leaf, a quiet thought, acknowledging the mountain's presence and asking for safe passage. You don't feel required to participate, but you understand the impulse. It's a way of saying, "I see you," without expecting a reply. Here's a lesser-known detail that settles in gently. Different apus were associated with different qualities: fertility, weather, protection, even personality. Some were considered generous, others demanding. Stories traveled with the road, shaping how people felt as they passed. Historians still wonder how much these beliefs influenced route planning and settlement placement versus emerging naturally from geography. Either way, belief and terrain folded into each other seamlessly. You resume walking, feeling smaller but not diminished. The mountains don't overwhelm, they contextualize. Your concerns shrink to their appropriate size. Breathing feels easier somehow, even though the air hasn't changed. Perspective does that. Another light joke arrives. You imagine apologizing to a mountain for stepping slightly off the road and feel it accept graciously. Having seen much worse, the road curves between two slopes, creating a corridor of stone and sky. Sound behaves differently here, muffled, intimate. Your footsteps echo softly, then disappear. You think about how many people have walked this same stretch with quiet respect, adjusting posture without thinking about it. Reverence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just straightens your spine. You remember that the Inca didn't separate the sacred from the practical. Mountains weren't just worshipped. They were sources of water, weather, and life. Honoring them was also a form of environmental awareness. Historians still debate how ritual intersected with resource management. But the outcome is clear. The landscape was treated as a partner rather than a resource to exhaust. The light softens further, shadows deepening into blues and greys. Clouds drift low, brushing peaks like absent-minded hands. You feel calm, grounded, unhurried. The road continues, but the moment stretches. As you walk on, with mountains standing quietly beside you, you understand that reverence doesn't require belief, only attention. And here, attention comes easily, carried forward by stone, breath, and the steady presence of something much older than you, content to let you pass. Night arrives without ceremony, like a thought that finishes itself while you're not watching. The light fades gradually, colors softening until the landscape becomes a study in contrast, stone and shadow, sky and suggestion. You don't stop when the sun slips away. Neither does the road. Night travel here isn't an exception. It's a rhythm the mountains accept. You notice the stars first, not as points, but as absence, the dark sky deepening enough to let them appear. One by one, they settle in unhurried. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a pale spill of grain, familiar and astonishing at the same time. This is a widely accepted fact that feels personal. At this altitude, with little moisture and no artificial light, the night sky reveals itself with startling clarity. You feel as if the stars have leaned closer. Your pace adjusts naturally. Steps shorten, attention widens. The road remains visible, pale stone catching starlight just enough to guide you. Inca travelers used the stars for orientation, timing, and seasonal awareness. Certain constellations mattered more than others, not just the bright patterns, but the dark shapes formed by clouds of dust within the Milky Way. A lesser-known detail that feels almost poetic. The Inca recognized dark constellations and forms, traced not by stars, but by the spaces between them. You look up and try to see it. A llama shape emerges slowly, formed by darker patches against the glowing band of the galaxy. It takes patience, the kind that arrives more easily at night. You smile when it clicks, that small satisfaction of understanding something without needing it explained. Historians still wonder how standardized these interpretations were across regions, but the shared sky made shared meaning inevitable. You walk on, guided by stone below and stars above, feeling held between two maps that agree with each other. The air cools, crisp and clean, carrying the faint scent of damp earth from earlier rain. Your breath becomes visible for a moment, then disappears. It's comforting, this evidence of movement in the dark. Here's a light joke that the night seems to appreciate. You consider how many modern devices would panic without a signal, and feel quietly smug that your navigation requires only eyes and patience. The road narrows again, then opens, revealing a gentle descent. Night amplifies sound in odd ways. A footstep echoes longer. A distant call travels farther. You're careful, but not tense. The road's edges are clear, and your body trusts the rhythm now. Step, breath, glance up, repeat. You think about the runners who moved through nights like this, sometimes carrying urgent messages, sometimes routine ones. Darkness didn't stop the system, it refined it. Torches were used sparingly, preserving night vision and minimizing risk. Often, starlight was enough. That restraint feels wise. Too much light can blind as easily as too little. Another gentle joke drifts in. You imagine turning on a bright lantern and the stars collectively sighing. You pause briefly to stretch, rolling your shoulders, and look up again. The sky feels endless, but not overwhelming. It's structured, patterned, familiar. The same stars guided planting, festivals, decisions. The same stars watched countless travelers pass. Each one brief, each one sincere. Historians still debate how astronomical knowledge was taught formal instruction versus apprenticeship, ritual versus observation. The evidence suggests a blend, practical and symbolic. Knowledge here wasn't separated into boxes. It moved with people, embedded in stories and songs, reinforced by repetition. Walking under these stars again and again would teach you what mattered without needing a lesson plan. You resume walking, feeling the cool air settle comfortably. Your thoughts slow, lengthening like shadows. The road hums quietly, a presence rather than a sound. You feel safe, not because nothing could happen, but because you're attentive enough to respond if it does. That confidence is calm, not loud. As the night deepens, you notice how time stretches. Minutes feel generous. Distance feels manageable. You're not racing the dark. You're moving with it. The stars shift subtly, a reminder that even what feels fixed is always in motion. You glance back once, just to see the road behind you dissolve into shadow, then turn forward again. The path ahead is clear enough. That's all you need. Guided by starlight and steady stone, you continue, carrying the quiet knowledge that night travel isn't about seeing everything. It's about seeing just enough, and trusting the rest to unfold at its own patient pace. By now, the road has stopped feeling like a thing you're on, and started feeling like something you're inside. Each step echoes softly in your body, not as effort, but as familiarity. Distance behaves differently when you've walked it. Maps flatten places into symbols, but footsteps restore their weight. The empire begins to make sense, not as lines and borders, but as accumulated movement. You notice how your body carries the road with it now calves, tuned to incline, shoulders adjusted to wind, breath calibrated to thin air. This is the widely accepted fact that rarely gets stated plainly. The Inca Empire functioned because people physically moved through it. Power here wasn't abstract. It was worn into muscles, calluses, habits. You pass another marker stone, half buried, easy to miss if you weren't already paying attention. You stop, not because you need rest, but because something about the place feels like punctuation. You look out over a valley where faint lights, flicker lamps, fires, quiet signs of life tucked into folds of land. These are communities connected by the road, shaped by it, sustained by it. The empire isn't somewhere else. It's right here, underfoot and ahead. A lesser-known detail rises gently into your thoughts. Many people in the empire never traveled far from home, yet still felt part of something vast. The road made that possible. Goods, news, customs, and stories flowed through even the smallest settlements. You didn't have to move far to feel connected. You just had to be reachable. Here's a light joke that slips in naturally. You imagine someone insisting they're not really a road person, while benefiting constantly from one. As you walk on, the scale of the system becomes less intimidating and more human. Yes, it was vast. Yes, it was organized. But it was also intimate, built around walking speed, human endurance, shared pauses. The empire didn't outpace its people. It matched them. That's a subtle form of power. You think about the relay runners again, about administrators waiting for news, about farmers planning around information that arrived reliably. Historians still wonder how unified people truly felt across such diverse regions and languages. But walking this road, you sense how unity doesn't require uniformity. It requires connection. The road didn't erase difference. It bridged it. The night air deepens, cool and steady. You pull your clothing closer, not from cold, but comfort. Your thoughts drift toward home, wherever that is for you, and you realize that roads shape that feeling too. Home isn't just a place you stay. It's a place you can return to, because something leads you there. Another gentle joke appears. You consider how many modern problems could be solved by walk it first and feel quietly amused. You slow slightly, not tired, just reflective. The road continues regardless, confident in its purpose. You understand now that empires aren't built only by rulers or battles. They're built by repeated, reliable actions, walking, resting, sharing, waiting, mundane things done well. As you move forward, the idea of the empire settles into something calmer. It's not a monument looming over you. It's a pattern beneath you. Step by step, it holds together. And with that understanding warming you more than any fire, you continue along the stone path, knowing that distance no longer feels abstract. Power no longer feels remote, and the road, steady, patient, human, has already taught you what it came to teach. The road begins to level out, almost imperceptibly at first, like a long-held breath finally released. Your steps soften. The stone beneath your feet feels warmer now, not in temperature, but in familiarity. You recognize the subtle cues, the way the path widens slightly, the way the air carries faint traces of smoke and cooked grain. You're approaching a place meant for stopping, not ending, just pausing. You arrive at a tampu, a roadside waystation, quiet and orderly even in the dim light. Low stone buildings sit close to the ground, as if they've chosen not to compete with the mountains. This is a widely accepted fact. The Inca built an extensive network of tampus, spaced a day's walk apart, providing rest, food, and shelter for travelers on official business. But standing here, it feels less like infrastructure and more like hospitality. You step inside one of the structures and lower yourself onto a stone bench, smoothed by countless previous occupants. Your legs hum faintly, not with pain, but with that pleasant afterglow of sustained movement. Someone has left behind a small bundle of coca leaves, neatly wrapped, clearly meant to be shared. You don't take any, but the gesture matters. It's an unspoken agreement across time. Rest here. You're welcome. A lesser-known detail drifts into your thoughts. Tampus weren't inns in the modern sense. You didn't pay, you didn't book. They were part of a reciprocal system. Travelers served the state, and the state sustained travelers. Historians still debate how flexible this system was for ordinary people versus officials. But the stones suggest generosity built into the design. You lean back and look at the ceiling's simple beams. No decoration. The lack of ornament feels intentional. This isn't a place to linger in thought. It's a place to let thought loosen. Your breathing slows naturally. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The road doesn't ask anything of you right now. Here comes a soft joke, barely louder than a whisper. You imagine ancient administrators arguing over who forgot to restock the maze, and feel oddly comforted that logistics headaches are eternal. Outside, the night continues its quiet work. Wind moves gently along the walls. Somewhere nearby, water flows, steady and reassuring. You think back over the journey, the runners, the food, the stars, the mountains watching patiently. It all feels cohesive now, like a single long sentence that finally found its punctuation. You realize something simple and grounding. You don't need to go anywhere else tonight. The road will still be there when you wake. Empires rise and fade, but rest remains necessary. Even the most efficient systems built in pauses. As your eyes grow heavier, you understand why this journey works as a lullaby. It's repetitive in the best way. Step, breath, stone, connection without urgency. History without sharp edges. You let your body sink into the bench, supported by stone, shaped by hands that understood fatigue intimately. The tampu holds you without comment. Outside, the mountains remain. The stars continue their slow rearrangement, and the road rests with you. You don't fall asleep because you're done. You fall asleep because you're held. Now, with the road quiet beneath you, and the night settled into its deepest, calmest rhythm, there's nothing left to carry. You can let your breathing slow even further. Each inhale gentle and unforced. Each exhale a little longer than the last. The stone around you feels steady, ancient, reliable, like something that has always known how to wait. Images drift lazily through your mind, the pale line of the road under stars, clouds brushing mountain shoulders, a warm drink shared without words. You don't need to hold on to them. Let them pass like clouds themselves, unhurried and soft-edged. If thoughts wander, that's fine. Let them wander down side paths and fade. You're not responsible for following them. The road can take care of itself tonight. So can history. Your body grows heavier, pleasantly so, as if gravity has decided to be kind. Muscles loosen, jaw unclenches, shoulders settle. Each breath feels like it smooths the edges of the day just a little more. You are safe. You are resting. You don't need to arrive anywhere else. The night will keep watch. The mountains are patient. The road remembers you. Sweet dreams.